Ever wondered what happened to the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ? Unlike big churches and millions of people adorning them today, in reality, some were fed to hungry lions, some were burned alive, speared down, some thrown into boiling oil, stoned to death, and others crucified on crosses just like Jesus Christ, making early Christianity one of the most persecuted religions ever to be. But all these did not stop the spread of Christianity as thought, but lead to its exponential growth. So let's peek into the journey of how the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ died, but their words didn't, and led to the spread of Christianity across the world. So hello all, I am AI Bobby, a time traveler, and I will be navigating you through the world of untold stories. So welcome aboard to the Untold Stories. Please do click on the subscribe button for more such untold stories. The 12 apostles of Jesus were ordinary men chosen for an extraordinary mission, to spread the teachings of Christ across the world. Each of them played a unique role in the rise of Christianity, but their paths were not easy. Most of the apostles met tragic and violent ends, martyrdom. In today's video, we'll dive deep into the fascinating and often brutal stories of how these men lived, spread the gospel, and died in service to their faith. So, let's get started. Number 1. Peter. We begin with Simon Peter, perhaps the most well-known of the apostles. Before he became known as Peter, Simon lived a modest life as a fisherman alongside his brother, Andrew. Fishing was no glamorous trade, it was backbreaking, labor-intensive, and often unrewarding. But one day, everything changed for Simon. When Jesus came to the shores of Galilee, Simon's life would take a dramatic turn. In one famous incident, Jesus tells Simon to cast his nets after a long, fruitless night of fishing. Despite his skepticism, Simon obeyed and hauled in a miraculous catch, so many fish that the nets began to break. In that moment, Simon fell to his knees, recognizing something divine in this man from Nazareth. As Christianity spread, so too did persecution. Peter eventually traveled to Rome, the heart of the Roman Empire, where Emperor Nero's brutal reign was just beginning. Christians were scapegoated for the great fire that destroyed much of the city, and Nero's response was ruthless. Peter was arrested and condemned to die. According to tradition, Peter requested to be crucified upside down because he felt unworthy to die in the same manner as Jesus. And so, Peter was nailed to a cross, upside down, and martyred for his faith. His death marked the end of his earthly journey, but his legacy was just beginning. Peter's body was buried in Rome, and today, Peter's Basilica stands over his final resting place. He remains one of the most venerated figures in Christianity, and his influence can still be felt in churches and believers around the world. Peter's role in the early church didn't end with his death. In fact, he is considered by many to be the first pope, the head of the Roman Catholic Church. The papal lineage is said to begin with Peter, making him a figure of immense importance for millions of Catholics today. Throughout history, Peter's story has been a symbol of redemption, leadership, and unwavering faith. Despite human flaws, his life was a testament to the power of grace and forgiveness. Even in moments of doubt, Peter never strayed far from his mission, and in the end, he was willing to lay down his life for the gospel. Number 2. Andrew. Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, is one of the lesser-known apostles. Yet his role in the story of Jesus is far from minor. Andrew's life was one of quiet dedication, deep faith, and a commitment to bringing others to Christ. He was the first of the apostles to be called, and it was through him that Peter met Jesus. Like many of the apostles, Andrew's story begins in a humble place, the shores of the Sea of Galilee. A fisherman by trade, Andrew worked alongside his brother Peter in the village of Bethsaida. Andrew's defining moment came when he encountered Jesus. According to the Gospel of John, Andrew and another disciple were with John the Baptist when they saw Jesus walk by. John the Baptist pointed at Jesus and said, "Behold the Lamb of God." In that instant, Andrew knew that he had found the Messiah. Without hesitation, Andrew followed Jesus, spending the day with him, listening to his teachings. Andrew's heart was stirred, and he immediately went to find his brother Simon Peter, telling him, "We have found the Messiah." It was Andrew who first introduced Peter to Jesus, and in doing so, he set into motion a chain of events that would change the world. After Jesus' resurrection, Andrew, like the other apostles, was tasked with spreading the gospel to the ends of the earth. Tradition holds that Andrew traveled far and wide, spreading the teachings of Christ in places as distant as Greece, Scythia, and the Black Sea region. His missionary work was extensive, and he became known as the apostle who journeyed into the unknown. bringing the light of Christ to pagan lands. Despite opposition from local authorities, Andrew's commitment to spreading the gospel never wavered. He baptized new believers, performed miracles, and fearlessly continued his mission. Even in the face of danger, Andrew's missionary work eventually led to his arrest. In Patras, the Roman governor, Aegeus, grew frustrated with Andrew's growing influence. Despite multiple warnings to stop preaching about Jesus, Andrew remained steadfast. For this, he was sentenced to die by crucifixion. However, Andrew's crucifixion was unlike any other. Tradition holds that Andrew requested to be crucified on an X-shaped cross rather than a standard one, feeling unworthy to die in the same manner as Jesus. This cross, now known as the Cross of Saint Andrew, has since become a symbol of humility and sacrifice. Andrew's death was not the end of his influence. His legacy lived on, and he became the patron saint of several countries, most notably Scotland and Russia. In Scotland, the X-shaped cross, known as the Saltire, is emblazoned on the national flag, a tribute to Saint Andrew's sacrifice. Number 3. James the Greater. James' story begins in the village of Bethsaida, where he and his brother John worked as fishermen alongside their father, Zebedee. Unlike Andrew and Peter, James and John were known to be men of wealth, owning their own boats and employing others to help with their work. Yet, despite their comfortable lives, they were called to something far greater. One day, as they mended their nets by the Sea of Galilee, Jesus approached them and said, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Without hesitation, James and John left their boats, their father, and their livelihood behind to follow Jesus. Their immediate response reflected not only their faith but their deep desire for something more profound than the daily grind of fishing. James' unwavering dedication to spreading the message of Jesus would ultimately lead to his martyrdom. In 44 AD, during the reign of King Herod Agrippa I, James was arrested for his faith and executed by the sword. His death marked a pivotal moment for the early Christian church. It was the first time that one of the original apostles had been killed for their belief in Jesus. But James' story didn't end with his death. According to legend, after his execution, James' body was miraculously transported to Spain, where he had supposedly preached during his missionary journeys. His remains were buried in what is now the city of Santiago de Compostela, which has since become one of the most important pilgrimage sites in Christianity. To this day, thousands of pilgrims walk the Camino de Santiago, a spiritual journey that leads to the shrine of Saint James. His tomb has become a symbol of faith, devotion, and endurance. People from all over the world make the journey to honor the apostle who fearlessly spread the gospel, even in the face of death. Number 4. Thomas. Thomas the Apostle, also known as Didymus, is often remembered for one moment of doubt, but to reduce his story to just that would be a disservice to the complexity of his character and the incredible life he led. Thomas, a man of both skepticism and faith, embarked on a journey that took him far from Jerusalem to distant lands like India. He would spread the teachings of Christ across the world and, in the end, become a martyr for his faith. Thomas became one of the most active apostles, traveling farther than many of the others. Tradition holds that Thomas ventured east, spreading the message of Christ as far as India. This makes him one of the earliest Christian missionaries to bring the gospel outside the Roman Empire. It is believed that Saint Thomas, the apostle of Jesus Christ, landed in the thriving Mussoorie port, now Kerala, India, in 52 AD, in search of Kochi Jews living there, which would have been relatively easy for him being an Aramaic-speaking Jew, and is said to have converted 32 Brahmin families, Malabari Jews, Buddhists and some natives. Between the 5th century and 13th century, hundreds of Middle Eastern families along with priests migrated and settled in Kerala, multiple times to Malabar, present-day Kerala, in India, to escape Islamic persecution in the Middle East on Christians, and joined native Christian community already present in Kerala. Also, another huge wave of Nambudri Brahmins joined the community between 12th and 14th centuries, incorporating several native Indian Brahminical customs, marriage traditions and dance forms. This would form a very distinctive early Christian community with unique traditions and customs different from other Christian nations across the world. Today this community in Kerala, India, is called as the Nasrani community or the Kerala Syrian Christian community. Thomas' time in India wasn't without danger. According to tradition, after converting many to Christianity, Thomas faced increasing hostility from local rulers and religious authorities. One of the most famous stories is that Thomas angered a local king by converting members of his family. According to legend, This king sent soldiers to arrest Thomas. As Thomas prayed on a hill near modern-day Chennai, the soldiers approached him. Rather than fleeing or hiding, Thomas remained steadfast in his faith. He was stabbed to death with a spear, becoming one of the earliest Christian martyrs in India. Thomas' mission in India was successful that even after his death, the Christian communities he founded continued to thrive. These St. Thomas Christians survived centuries of religious and political change, including the massive atrocities caused on this community by the Portuguese Inquisition in a quest to forcefully convert these early Christians to Latin Catholicism. But even today they preserve a distinct Christian tradition in India and use East Syriac in church liturgy, a dialect of Aramaic, the language spoken by Jesus Christ himself. In 1964, Pope Paul V gifted a bone relic of St. Thomas to the Church of St. Thomas in Chennai, India, as a symbol of the deep connection between Thomas and the Indian Christian community. Number 5. John. John was the younger brother of James, and both were the sons of Zebedee, a fisherman, and Salome, who is believed by many scholars to have been a follower of Jesus as well. Before following Christ, John and his brother worked alongside their father as fishermen on the Sea of Galilee. When Jesus called them to be fishers of men, John left everything behind. From this point onward, he dedicated his life to Jesus' ministry. Alongside Peter and James, John became part of the inner circle of disciples, those closest to Jesus during pivotal moments like the Transfiguration and the agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. After the resurrection of Jesus, John played a significant role in spreading the teachings of Christ. Alongside Peter, he helped lead the early Christian community in Jerusalem. John's boldness and unwavering faith were evident as he and Peter stood before the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council, declaring that they could not stop speaking about what they had seen and heard. Despite persecution and threats, John continued to preach the gospel fearlessly. Legend has it that John survived being boiled alive in oil. Early Christian tradition claims that the Roman authorities attempted to kill John by boiling him in oil, but he miraculously emerged unharmed. This miraculous survival is one of the reasons John is often associated with divine protection. Later in life, John's unwavering faith led to his exile on the island of Patmos, under the Roman Emperor Domitian. It was here, in isolation, that John received a series of visions that would become the Book of Revelation. Unlike most of the other apostles who were martyred for their faith, John is believed to have lived to an old age and died of natural causes. According to early church tradition, he lived out his final years in Ephesus, where he continued to preach and care for the growing Christian community. Number 6. Philip. Philip the Apostle, a man often overshadowed by the more prominent apostles like Peter, John, and Paul, was one of the 12 chosen by Jesus to spread his message across the world. Though his story is not as extensively documented in the New Testament, Philip played a vital role in the early church and in the spread of Christianity to new regions. Philip was from the small town of Bethsaida, the same hometown as Peter and Andrew. Like many of the apostles, Philip's early life was shaped by the simplicity of Galilean life, likely a fisherman or tradesman. Though the Gospels don't reveal much about his early life, we know that Philip was a devout follower of Jewish customs and eagerly awaited the coming of the Messiah. When Jesus called Philip to be his disciple, there was no hesitation. Philip immediately answered the call, becoming one of the earliest followers of Christ. In fact, Philip's enthusiasm was so contagious that he brought Nathanael to meet Jesus, declaring, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth." After the resurrection and ascension of Jesus, Philip, like the other apostles, was tasked with spreading the gospel. While the Bible doesn't go into great detail about Philip's missionary journeys, early Christian tradition tells us that Philip took the gospel to regions far beyond Judea, including Greece, Phrygia, and modern-day Turkey. Philip's mission took him into foreign lands where he faced many challenges. Story from Philip's missionary work is that he confronted the worship of idols in a city in Phrygia, which caused uproar among the pagan priests. Despite the dangers, Philip continued to preach the message of Christ, never wavering in his faith. Philip's death came as a result of his preaching against the local pagan practices. He was arrested and, according to some accounts, was crucified upside down. Much like Peter, others suggest that he was tied to a cross and stoned by an angry mob. Regardless of the specific details, what is clear is that Philip died a martyr's death, a testimony to his unwavering faith. Even in his final moments, Philip is said to have continued preaching the gospel, praying for the people who were executing him. His courage and faithfulness made a profound impact. And even after his death, his legacy continued in the early Christian communities he helped to establish. Number 7. Bartholomew. Bartholomew the Apostle. A name that may not be as familiar as Peter, Paul, or John, but his story is just as profound. Known in some traditions as Nathanael, Bartholomew was one of the 12 apostles chosen by Jesus to spread the good news. Though mentioned infrequently in the Gospels, his faith, missionary work, and the brutal manner of his martyrdom make him one of the most fascinating figures in early Christianity. In the Gospel of John, Bartholomew is believed to be the same person as Nathanael. His first appearance in Scripture is a brief but impactful one. Philip, one of the earliest followers of Jesus, found Nathanael and excitedly told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth." After the ascension of Jesus, Bartholomew, like the other apostles, was tasked with spreading the gospel across the known world. Though the Bible does not provide much detail about his missionary work, early Christian traditions tell us that Bartholomew traveled far beyond Judea to spread the teachings of Christ. According to these traditions, Bartholomew's missionary work took him to places like Armenia, Mesopotamia, and even Ethiopia. Some believe Bartholomew preached as far as Arabia and Persia, making him one of the most widely traveled apostles. Bartholomew's dedication to his mission wasn't without its challenges. In these foreign lands, he encountered resistance and hostility, especially from local religious leaders who saw his teachings as a threat. According to early Christian accounts, Bartholomew was martyred in Armenia, where he had successfully converted many to Christianity. His death was ordered by King Astyages, whose brother had converted to the Christian faith under Bartholomew's influence. Enraged by this, the king sought to make an example of the apostle. The method of Bartholomew's martyrdom is both shocking and gruesome. He was flayed alive, his skin was literally peeled from his body, and then crucified upside down. Despite the unimaginable pain he endured, it is said that Bartholomew continued to profess his faith until the very end. His martyrdom stands as a powerful testament to his unshakable belief in Christ and his willingness to suffer for the gospel. Bartholomew's death didn't end his influence. After his martyrdom, his followers continued to spread the message of Christ in the regions where he had preached. Number 8. Matthew. Matthew the Apostle, a man who went from being a despised tax collector to one of the most devoted followers of Jesus Christ. Known also as Levi, Matthew's transformation serves as a powerful example of God's grace and redemption. He would go on to write the gospel that bears his name, giving us one of the most detailed accounts of the life and ministry of Jesus. After Jesus' resurrection and ascension, Matthew, like the other apostles, took up the Great Commission, spreading the gospel to new regions. Though the Bible does not detail his missionary journeys, early Christian traditions suggest that Matthew traveled far to preach the good news. Accounts place Matthew's missionary work in Ethiopia, Persia, Parthia, and even as far as modern-day Syria. He is said to have preached to both Jews and Gentiles, spreading the teachings of Christ in areas that had never heard the message of salvation. Like many of the apostles, Matthew faced opposition and persecution for his message, but his faith remained unshaken as he continued to spread the gospel wherever he went. Traditions suggest that Matthew was killed in Ethiopia, where he had successfully converted many to Christianity. He is believed to have been stabbed or beheaded for refusing to renounce his faith. Regardless of the specific details, what is certain is that Matthew died as a faithful witness to Christ. Matthew's legacy continues to influence Christians around the world. His gospel remains one of the most studied books in the New Testament, and his story of transformation from sinner to saint inspires countless believers. Number 9. James the Lesser. James the Lesser is mentioned in the New Testament as one of the 12 apostles. His name appears in the lists of apostles in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Acts. But who exactly was he? James is called the Lesser, not because he was any less important than James the Greater, but likely due to his younger age or shorter stature. This distinction was made to differentiate him from James, the brother of John, who was a prominent figure among the apostles. James the Lesser is often identified as the son of Alphaeus and possibly the brother of the apostle Matthew. Unlike some of the other apostles who traveled far and wide to preach the gospel, James likely remained in Jerusalem, helping to establish the Christian community there. His leadership was crucial during the church's formative years, guiding believers through times of persecution and growth. Like many of the apostles, James the Lesser remained faithful to his calling even in the face of persecution. According to early Christian tradition, James was martyred for his faith, though the exact details of his death are uncertain. Tradition holds that James was thrown from the pinnacle of the temple in Jerusalem after refusing to deny Christ. When he survived the fall, his enemies beat him to death with a club. This brutal death mirrors the fate of many of the apostles, who willingly gave their lives for the gospel. James' martyrdom is a powerful reminder of the cost of discipleship. Like the other apostles, James remained steadfast in his faith, even to the point of death, offering a courageous example of devotion to Christ. Number 10. Jude. Thaddeus, also known as Jude or Judas the Zealot, is one of the lesser-known apostles of Jesus Christ. Despite his relatively quiet presence in the New Testament, his life and contributions to early Christianity hold significant importance. Thaddeus is identified as a member of the Zealots, a political movement known for its fervent opposition to Roman rule. This background suggests that he was deeply committed to the idea of Jewish independence and may have initially viewed Jesus' message through a political lens. After Jesus' ascension, Thaddeus, like the other apostles, took on the mission of spreading the gospel. Though details of his ministry are sparse, early Christian traditions suggest that he traveled to various regions to preach. Tradition holds that Thaddeus preached in places such as Edessa, which is in modern-day Turkey. There, he is said to have performed miracles and established Christian communities. His efforts contributed to the spread of Christianity in regions far from Jerusalem. Like many of the apostles, Thaddeus faced persecution for his faith. Tradition suggests that Thaddeus was martyred in Persia with an axe. His death is often associated with violent persecution, reflecting the harsh realities faced by early Christian missionaries. Thaddeus' martyrdom highlights the cost of discipleship and the bravery of those who risked everything to spread the message of Jesus Christ. Interesting fact is that Thaddeus is often depicted in Christian art holding a club or a halberd, symbolizing his martyrdom. These symbols reflect the violent manner in which he is believed to have died and serve as a testament to his faithfulness. Jude may not have been as widely known as some of the other apostles, but his story is one of transformation, commitment, and unwavering faith. His journey from a zealot to a devoted apostle exemplifies the profound changes that faith in Jesus can bring. Number 11. Simon. Simon the Zealot, one of Jesus' 12 apostles, is a figure shrouded in both mystery and significance. Known for his radical political background, Simon's transformation from a fervent nationalist to a devoted follower of Christ provides a fascinating glimpse into the early days of Christianity. Despite the sparse details about his individual actions, Simon's inclusion among the apostles indicates that Jesus saw potential in him beyond his radical past. Simon, like the other apostles, was entrusted with the mission of spreading Jesus' teachings and establishing the early church. Early Christian traditions suggest that Simon traveled extensively to spread the gospel. He is said to have preached in places like Egypt and Persia, demonstrating his commitment to sharing Jesus' message far beyond his homeland. According to tradition, Simon was martyred by being sawed in half, a gruesome fate reflecting the severe persecution faced by early Christians. Hence, Simon is often depicted in Christian art holding a saw, a symbol of his martyrdom. Simon the Zealot's life is a remarkable testament to the transformative power of faith. From his revolutionary zeal to his dedication as an apostle, Simon's journey reflects the profound changes that the message of Jesus can bring. His story, though less detailed in the New Testament, adds a unique and inspiring dimension to the legacy of the apostles. Simon's transformation and contributions remind us of the boundless possibilities for change and redemption in the Christian faith. Number 12. Judas Iscariot. We all perhaps did not know how the other apostles of Jesus Christ dies, but surely most of us will indeed know how this man's life ended. Yes, he is Judas Iscariot, a name that resonates with betrayal and treachery, often credited for leading to the death of Jesus. Judas Iscariot is listed among the 12 apostles chosen by Jesus. As an apostle, Judas Iscariot was entrusted with the role of treasurer for Jesus' ministry. He managed the group's funds and was responsible for the financial needs of Jesus and the apostles. Judas' role as treasurer was significant, indicating that he held a position of trust and responsibility. However, his handling of the money would become a critical point in his story. The most infamous aspect of Judas Iscariot's story is his betrayal of Jesus. For 30 pieces of silver, Judas agreed to hand over Jesus to the religious authorities, leading to his arrest and eventual crucifixion. After realizing the gravity of his actions, Judas was consumed by guilt. According to the Gospel of Matthew, He tried to return the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, declaring, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." Unable to undo his betrayal, Judas subsequently went out and hanged himself. His tragic end highlights the profound sense of remorse and despair that followed his actions. Judas Iscariot's life and actions remain some of the most debated and discussed topics in Christian history. His story, marked by betrayal and tragedy, serves as a profound reminder of the complexities of human nature and the consequences of our actions. From his role as an apostle to his infamous betrayal, Judas Iscariot's legacy continues to provoke thought and discussion. His story, though filled with sorrow and regret, is a crucial part of the narrative that shaped the course of Christian history. Thank you for being patient listeners. This is signing off. AI Bobby, from The Untold Stories. For more such informative, untold stories, subscribe our channel. For you it's just a click of the button, and no loss. But for us it is an encouragement to keep telling you untold stories. Thank you.